that the Caucasian still wants to maintain the ability to shape the personality of our people. I have said it before and I will say it again. The African American, to a large extent, is an artificial man. We are a creation, not only the African American, generally pretty much on a worldwide basis, a creation of another people. And we have to look at that fact, that we have been shaped to fit within the systems of another people. I often have said that the best way to understand the psychology of the black child, which is also the psychology of the black adult because they're one and the same, is of course to understand the psychology of brainwashing. We are a brainwashed people. We are a sick people. Neurotic and psychotic. Now that seems, certainly, if you're shaped by neurotic and psychotic and crazy people, you reflect their own craziness and their own madness. You see? And in order to shape the people, you have to have control of their environment. We often talk about the skin of a rat. How do you make that rat do what it does? By having control of its very existence and reinforcing it according to a plan and according to a program. When we recognize and we look at the skin of a rat, we will see that the black ghettos the world over are skin of boxes, and that we are the rats in those boxes. And you will look at a reinforcement program put into being to shape our characters, personalities, perception, social relationships, and everything so as to fit within the overall plan of the European. So this shaping process continues. You can look at it in the African slave. What happens here with the African, and how do you bring about brainwashing, and how do you really begin to change a person's personality? Of course, one of the major things you must do is put them under stress. Heavy stress. Heavy stress and anxiety has the effect of disorganizing an individual, as many of you have taken the exam of know. Right? It doesn't matter how well you study quite often. If you let that anxiety build up too much, your whole memory goes out. Your ability even sometimes to control your current situation goes out. Everything that you've learned in your past becomes useless when that anxiety reaches a certain level of development. Let's look at the African man for a moment and see how this happens. If you want to run if you really want to brainwash a person and so forth, of course one of the things you should do is arrest them in a way that they don't even know what they're being arrested for. Why are you taking me in? What is this? I've done nothing, and just haul them in anyway, and refuse to tell them. Puzzle. Right away confusion is in their mind. And the mind now is opening up to be suggestible. The more and more you confuse. The other thing, of course, is to arrest them at night. 12, 2 o'clock in the morning. To bang on the door and knock on the door down, you open the door and wham, somebody's in there and they got you hustling you out. Now you hustle out, no one knows that you're gone. You wonder if your neighbors don't see you gone, your family don't know where you are. And now you're completely cut off and isolated from everything and everybody that you know. Thus you don't know what these people are going to do with you. They got you down there in this dungeon somewhere. They're threatening you and terrorizing you. You don't understand why you're there. You don't understand what they're asking. You don't understand what they're getting after. And now that you have no one to call on, you can't call your lawyer, you can't call your family. Nothing that you knew in the past can work for you. Helplessness, powerlessness, and dependency sets in. You're in the hands of your captor. And now the basis for interrogation, indoctrination begins. When you look at this African man taken into a new world that he knows nothing about, sold, marched, put into the high states of fatigue, many people dying, separated from friend, family, separated even from his God. You know what a terrifying feeling it is to feel that you're deserted by your God? When you've organized your whole life around the idea that this God is going to take care of you, and he's brought you the rain and the wind and all these other wonderful things, and all of a sudden you call out and he doesn't even, or she, whatever it is you wish it, doesn't even see to hear you either and desert you? No. What kind of despair that brings to the mind of the individual? What it means then when you're separated from the elders who used to instruct you and counsel you and interpret the world for you and give you some kind of guide, and they're not there to help you out either. Mom is not there, dad is not there, the village is not there. The whole structure and social structure which used to make sense out of life for you is absent. You're with a bunch of people who don't understand your language, nothing you say. You're with another bunch who are saying things you don't understand what they're saying, but they're pushing you, shoving you, marching you, and moving you forward. Shock, bewilderment, and now taken across this ocean and taken into a new system that you don't understand without any of the supports. Nothing that you've known previously, what, does you any good. Hopeless and powerless. Your captor becomes, in a sense, your savior. In a strange sort of way. Okay. You see? And now he's going to tell you, he's getting ready to introduce you into a new set of rules and regulations that are going to run your life. Because he's knocked the other ones out of you now. And he's going to implant a new set. When you terrorize people to a certain degree and put them in such a degree, they become very suggestible. You see, and open. And you get them to learn not in terms of reason, but they learn emotionally. They learn, as a matter of fact, in a state of mind where their critical faculties have gone and their ability to evaluate has disappeared. And the kind of learning that's going to be put into their head quite often is no longer subject to logical criticism. You see? And I wish we have sometimes talk about this in the future a little bit. You know, sometimes I see it as the way sometimes we as parents work with our children. Through fear. And here you are, this giant adult, you know, sometimes I think we forget, you know, how maybe we look to children. Particularly a small and helpless child is standing in front of you, and that child, and if you got this ferocious look on your face, and they don't know whether you're going to kill them or not, and quite often they think you are going to kill them, you know, and there's that terror there. Now, you don't have to tell them reasonably what you want them to do or why you want them to do it. What do you say? Do what I say. Do. Don't even question it. And if you do what I say do, and if you follow what I say follow, then you will be relieved of the horror that you're experiencing right now. And then quite often then the child learns this thing unemotional, learn it without any reason, and it's implanted into the mind, and all it knows is if I behave this way, I don't have to suffer the horror and pain. As a matter of fact, it becomes thankful to you for not killing it. So even the terrorizer builds in an ambivalent attitude in the terrorized individual. This is why quite often even an abused child attaches itself even to the abusing parent. You see? And because there's a certain level of relief even in the moment of terror. But it's bought at the price of obedience and at the price, of course, of learning rules and regulations and other kinds of things. I wish we had time to talk about how this leads into integrationism and those people who want to get these people to love them. You know? One of the great puzzles, we can't do it, we don't have the time. One of the great puzzles we have, of course a lot of people have, why is it that many black people do not really have very strong rage against whites, looking at what has happened to us in this experience. You see, and of course that's about a puzzle you run into even as a worker with abused children. You'd be quite surprised that many of these children do not have the kind of rage against parents who really abuse them that you would think that they would have. But you see, even strong emotions such as hatred, such as fear and terror, can attach you to the person who terrorizes you. That person can become the very center of your consciousness. What you fear also manipulates you in many ways. And the love of that individual and the acceptance by that individual can become the chief motive of your life. I can see many black adults and other adults who are 30, 40, and 50 years old are still trying to get mama to love them. Still working with the issue of can I get mama to love them? Neglect their own family, neglect their own personal growth, neglect what's their own reality, and they're still fighting old wounds. You see, a negative thing, a negative experience, and ladies and gentlemen, we're finding out these experiences begin even in the womb. And not only do they begin in the womb, they begin even at the point of birth. Strangely enough, the victim can become a part of being victimized. Because once you traumatize a person and create such conflict into that individual, you bias that individual's brain. And you bias their perception of reality. And quite often then they will approach reality and they will perceive reality in terms of the tremendous traumatic event that occurred in their lives. And these traumas have ways of sucking into themselves many things that go on in life. In fact, almost everything quite often becomes related to the original trauma and is brought in to the original trauma. And each trauma after that is complexed into the original one. Even if it's one of displeasure. An unresolved trauma, for instance, you know how you get into a conflict and another person is around, or some other people, you try to bring them in to get on one side or the other? Quite often the individual who's severely traumatized relates to people throughout life in this way. Which side of this conflict that's going on in my mind are you going to be on? Quite often they're looked at symbolically. Let me give you a quick case here. There was one man there who had a quirk. And that quirk was that he liked other men in black suits. And then he wanted those men to take him, lock him up in a dark cell, tie him up, and torture him. You know, one of these very perverted spirits here. And in fact, he had a great sensitivity for this. He could go to the parks and into the toilets and to wherever, people roam and pick those kind of people out. And he had some terrifying ones sometimes. One guy, he got to riding on the train with him. They were going up to his place there, and he was going to torture him the way he wanted to be tortured. And the guy had a knapsack there, and the guy said, well, I'm going to the bathroom. He said, I better check out this knapsack while this guy's going to the bathroom here. Opens it up, there's a butcher knife in there and a meat cleaver, and becomes sensitized to wanting to be to darkness, to people who are in darkness, and to the possibility that somebody is going to lock him up and do this thing to him. Even though you see that as a traumatic event, it becomes a basis for his connection with these people, despite the fact that there's a negative experience with it. He becomes attached. His mind becomes sensitized to this kind of thing. And he repeats, in a way, the original experience over and over and over again. And he brings in people as he meets into that situation over and over again. The neurotic person never sees another person as a real person. They're always symbolic in one way or the other. You see? So then, quite often this torture and this stuff that we've been through has attached too many of us to our torturer. has sensitized us, has made it very important to us that this person loves us like a torturous mother or father. Nothing else has quite the priority other than that we get these people to accept us and see how real and human we are. And you'll often see the neglected child in the relationship. Every time mama is sick, mama treat her like a dog, she's right there, serving. And the one that mama spoiled probably don't even come to the house, don't even worry about it, but mama still loves them. Right there on the deathbed, they're still there. They're looking for one day mama to say, oh, I mistook you. I know now you're just a wonderful daughter. And, I love you so much and forgive me and I'm going to accept you. But somehow, quite often, it never comes, does it? It never occurs. And then quite often after all this service, mama still wills her stuff to the other ones. You're caught up in bitterness. So it reminds me of our people, attached to this people. We died for you in the Revolutionary War. We died for you in the Civil War. We died for you in the Korean War. In fact, we protested to make you put us in the army. And send our sons over and get them killed and mangled and destroyed. We went to World War, and then so we can come back and say, see what I've done for you, see what great sacrifices, see what great love. Now don't you feel ashamed of yourself? Why don't you love me and come back, and take me in? And we have then, many of us, who see this as the ultimate priority of our lives, of being loved and being accepted and being seen by people who do not deserve it, who not deserve our love and our acceptance. So this kind of brainwashing continued into the Africanism, placed in many of us in these kind of priorities. And we have people then who come out with the same values, the same outlooks, going for the same goals, want the same education, want the same, all immediately. I want the same. Who can't think of alternatives to what exists? Who can't say, hey, maybe we want something different, and maybe that difference is even better. You see? No, it goes down into a psychology. In fact, it's often, I used to talk to some psychologists who they would work their lives out trying to prove how the black child is the same as the white child. How similar they are. But ladies and gentlemen, it's the sameness that's killing you. As a matter of fact, one of the means by which we're going to be manipulated is that we're going to be promised and given the same. Equality is a bogus game. I'm going to use the illustration here of if you have two beakers filled with water and one is at this level and one at the other level, and you pour the same amount of water in, and what do you get? A maintenance of what? The same inequality. Pouring the same in two unequal quantities does not equal equality, ladies and gentlemen. It maintains the difference. You may have more than you had before, but in relative to the other person, you're still just as far away from them. And therefore, many of our leaders and others will come to us saying, well, you should get the same and the equal thing, you see, that these other people get. And many of them will go along with that philosophy. Well, in the end, it means that you never catch up. Right. You see? And so sameness becomes a philosophy of life. You pray to the same Jesus the white man prays to. But Jesus is going to bless him more than bless you, Oh, yeah. He's going to bless you. He's going to bless him every time. Every time. And you know why? Because you believe the same as he does. Why is it the same? You see, the same idea in a different context leads to unequal results. The thing you must see, it is not the idea that is important, but the context in which the idea operates. So that the same idea can have completely opposite effects depending upon the context in which it operates. The same idea then that the powerful carriage will maintain their power and maintain the powerlessness of the powerless. You see? So the idea here then is a difference. So you pray to Jesus and you pray and you believe in him. That's nice. I'm not attacking that. And then you believe the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor, this and that. Wonderful. Except for one thing, when another people stolen everything from you and got everything, that same belief then is a defensive morality for him. This is why the most evil people are going to be the first to teach morality. And the most evil, destructive nation on earth has the most evangelists all over the globe. As a matter of fact, their evangelists are in front of them, as we've seen in history. You see? And they're going to leave you with the morality. And he can be quite sincere. So once that middle class gets you to believe thou shalt not steal, and should be meek and wait for your reward in heaven, and all of that, then that protects his own interest. Because if you really believe that stuff, he can sleep at night over his stolen goods. Because he knows that you're so moral, you're not going to come and take it back from him. You're going to be so nice and wait for your reward, you're not going to, even if you complain a little bit about it, that's all right. You're going to let it go on because, whoever's going to. So it plays two roles, keeping you powerless and keeping the other people in power. The same kind of game with individualism. You do your thing and I do mine. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no individual freedom without your group being free. Your individuality, it must be protected by your group and by the power of your group. It is an illusion for you to think that you as an individual can be free as long as your people are not free. And this group, you see, likes to run up on us in this concept of individualism. It's beautiful, ladies and gentlemen, because if they can individualize every other ethnic group, they can maintain that group in fragmentation. Because they know it is organization and identity and unity as nations and people that will destroy them, not a group of individuals. So then you come in here and get brainwashed and you accept this value on face without recognizing that it's going to have the complete opposite effect upon you depending upon where your level is and upon them depending upon where they are. It's the same game that's run on our nations across the world. Free markets, free competition. There should be no restriction between nations. We should trade freely and across barriers and so forth. Of course, you saw the United States play that game very well. That sounds very nice, doesn't it? But again, you recognize that it's a philosophy of people who have what? Money. Yeah, who's got money, see? Now, he wants a free market. Now, look what the United States is trying to do with Japan. They're trying to keep them out. They're putting the barriers. They're doing all these kind of things. But you see, while they had the ball in their hands, they were for free markets all over the place because that opens up everybody else's country for them. And since they have now the economic advantage in the money, free markets becomes a wonderful idea. So consequently, it's that sameness business that is destroying our people. And it is that kind of philosophy that was implanted into the heads of our people during this brainwashing session of slavery and continues to this very day. Brainwashing, of course, is going on right now. So we move from slavery to racism, which I've told you before. That's kind of gone out of style, but the old game is still played. It's played in the name of economics and economic opportunity and this kind of stuff. And of course, when we look at our children, what do we find here? You see, the major question, the major thing that you should look at as to why our children do not learn as well in school, regardless of whether you put them in integrated schools or this kind of school or other, is that, ladies and gentlemen, they must not learn. You see? They must not learn. Okay? We often forget that the European is only 10 or 20% of the world's population. By the 1990s, it would be about 10% of the world's population. It's a doggone shame. that these people who have no resources to speak of under their globe, under their earth, and of course you look at the Japanese, so basically a rock out there, nothing under it. And we have a reverse situation here of the nations with the most natural wealth have the poorest people, and the nations with nothing are the richest. And the people who are in control are the smallest minority in the world. Now how is it then that this small group of people can manipulate this other group of people? They basically can manipulate them, other than of course direct military control, which we've seen is playing out, but used in other ways. It must be in part based upon the ignorance of those people. You see? As I've often said, in order for us as people to be in the conditions we're in, we must be out of our minds. Think about it.
Yes, sir.
We must be out of our minds. I want you to think about that for a minute, because I know some of it seems a little peculiar. Yeah. You got to be out of your minds. This little group of people over there whose countries are hardly bigger than Texas when you put them all together, and 90% of these people of color, are ruled and regulated by this group. You know these people have to be out of their minds? They could almost run over these people if they wanted to, just by force of numbers, without even weaponry. You have to be out of your mind. The brother mentions I'm writing a book now on black psychotherapy. And it's based on that idea that blacks have to be out of their minds. The craziness must be built in. Do you recognize that if these people, these so-called third world people, could think as well or better than Europeans, that the Europeans, they would be over today? That if we could think and move into abstractions and handle these symbols, and if we then on top of that could unite as a group and work as a group, it would be the end for this person. So consequently, in order for him to maintain this must not be allowed to occur. The ability to think abstractly, constructively, conceptually, and to unite emotionally and as a group and as an organized people must not be allowed to come into existence. Because if it did, it would end European domination. So consequently, you will see it in the children. And it must begin very early, that the ability to think and reason and to handle symbols and to see relationships and to look behind appearances, as I've talked about, must not be allowed to exist in those children. So that as adults, they can't see the game that's run on them. They cannot understand and look behind the appearances of propaganda. They must not be able to recognize and the game for what it is, and to build for themselves and to unite and set themselves up in such a way so as to destroy their enemies. So that ability must be out. And consequently you see it knocked right out of our children. What is it you see in the Garden of Eden? How does the devil gain control? How is paradise lost? Through deception, through a lie, through a reversal of truth. The devil comes in and reverses the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, the world you live in today is a world constructed of lies.
That's right.
It is built on lies. It is reversed. It is reversed. Completely reversed. The world is perfect. It's perfect. See, a lot of people, at first they don't, how can you say it's perfect when we see all the things that go on? But you see, this is again, you see, the black education must be an education that questions every assumption that you have in your mind. There must not be a one that is left unquestioned. In fact, it's the ones that appear self-evident that should be the first one to come up for scrutiny. You see? The one that you don't bother, everybody knows that. That's the one that's got you going. You see? Don't confuse perfection with goodness. You see, you can be perfectly evil. See, a lot of people say, we're perfect, we used to use them perfect meaning good, the best. No, perfection has nothing to do with good or evilness. It has to do with a lawful relationship between things. An invariable lawful relationship between things. Where something invariably follows another thing. That's perfection. Not good, not bad. That is perfection. So when you go to shoot that basketball at a hoop, it doesn't go in. You say, I made an error. Oh, no error is made there. It's perfect. Why? Because the ball goes exactly where it is supposed to go. When you add up all of the forces acting up on it, what is going to happen? It goes exactly where it's supposed to go. It may not go where you intended for it to go, but it goes exactly where it's supposed to go. Everything goes that way. It happens exactly the way it's supposed to happen. It's built that way. Now, what do I mean by that then? This world is perfect. The misery you see in it, the rape, robbery, and killing, and war, and death, and mistrust, and racism, and all the other stuff, is a perfect follow-up to the perception that people have of each other. It must follow that if you see someone as being different from you and as being your enemy, what is going to flow out of that ultimately? War. It follows perfectly from that, ladies and gentlemen. That's why Jesus tells you what? Love thy neighbor what? As thyself. You must not see a difference between your neighbor and yourself. You must be at one with what? The universe. And when you can then see yourself as being one and the universe as being one, then there's a whole different way of relating. Different things would follow from that. But if you see the neighbor separate and as an enemy, you see the neighbor in the racist terms, you see the neighbors being inferior, superior, what must follow? War, death, murder, and everything will follow perfectly from that state of mind. Think today what would happen if we reversed the way we think and the way we relate to each other as people. Think today if we had some Christians in the world. What would be? Yeah, we don't have any Christians in the world. In fact, we don't hardly have any other religious groups in the world either, to tell you the truth. Hold on, we don't listen. Think what would happen if this country, which claims to be a Christian country, really followed the precept. I wouldn't even have to be here lecturing today, would I? The fact that I'm here lecturing today is due to the fact that people are unchristian and perceive the world the way they do it. Yeah. Now, a lot of us are in church, but you're not Christian. How many of you would be nailed to the cross and say, Lord, forgive them, for they know not what to do? That's what Christ did. How many can be spit on in the face and slapped and misaccused and all the other kind of things? How could he say that? He could say that because he recognized that his persecutors were acting out of ignorance. He could say that because he recognized that they could not what? Act in any other way, given what? Their state of mind. You see, if they had a different state of mind and a different consciousness, then they would not have been nailing him to that cross. So then he could say, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Because if they really knew what was happening, they couldn't do it. How many of us are not? A whole different world. The world is reversed. Very reversed. if we change our ways of thinking, and we're Christian, or Muslim, or Buddhist, or whatever you want to be, because all of them basically teach peace, love, the oneness, and all of this kind of thing. If those believers of those groups, wouldn't you have a very different world today, ladies and gentlemen? Certainly. That's why Christ says what? You must be born again. What does being born again mean? It means you must reverse your way of dealing with the world and yourself and relating to other people. You must look upon the life that you're leading as a sinner as one that is totally unacceptable, wretched, and causing you trouble and the world trouble. And you must see yourself in a different light, take on a new name, relate to people in different ways, and perceive people in different ways. And if then this were the case, then the world would change. One time I was with a young lady there. Jokingly, we were walking down the street and said, well, let's go in here and look at this movie, a little pornographic movie, you know. What kind of girl do you think I am? You know, all into tears, you know. Whoa. She was crying out, oh man, she was really insulted. But I would take her and even mention that she would go to one of those nasty movies. Those dirty things. You think about it though. Think about it a little bit though, you know. Then we went down the street and we saw this thing, I forget the name of it now. This guy had a big stick beating people in the head, shooting and blood spattering everywhere, snatching eyes out and chopping them and carrying on. You know? And she thought she was normal. Because this is what normal people do. You know? You see, people confuse normality with health, don't they? Normality and health, ladies and gentlemen, is not the same thing, just like perfection and goodness are not the same thing. Don't let people confuse you and say because you're normal, you're not crazy. No, it means you're normally crazy like all the rest of us. You know? In a world of one-legged men, the norm is one leg, isn't it? Doesn't say, oh, the norm is that's the way it should be. But this is the kind of deception. He's normal. She's normal. Look, ladies and gentlemen, what the normal people have taught us in this world today. Look at this world of normal people. Right? So it becomes terrible for your child to see people trying to bring each other a little happiness, loving each other, hugging each other, kissing each other, being nice to each other. I'm talking about a nice pornography movie now, not one of those vicious types. That's terrible. That's nasty. That's unclean. But it's not unclean to sit them in front of a TV and watch rapes and robberies and murders and killing and war and so forth and so on. So then if this is what normal people watch. Murder, death, destruction. But let's not have them watching too much loving and stuff going on. That's too bad. There's no wonder then you got a world of war carried on by whom? Normal people. See? Killing and death flowing out of normality. What a reversal. Of course, in a nation that depends upon war, death, and destruction, what you want the children to think is what? That war, death, and destruction is what? Normal. So you fill them with a diet of normal war, death, and destruction. You give them toys and the whole bit there, and so forth. So it doesn't matter if they're hung up sexually and so forth. That's too bad. Just as long as they're ready to go to the army when Sam calls them and march them out and so forth. Normal means you're normally suggestive, and all Uncle Sam has to do is put from a post is point a finger at you and says, Uncle Sam wants you, and you come right in. Because this is what normal people do. It doesn't matter that you can start the war. It doesn't matter that you don't know what the war is about. It doesn't matter if the war is there to protect Rockefeller properties and to protect rich people who are never going to get hurt or killed. It doesn't matter that some people are not going to come back. Others will have faces torn off, limbs torn apart, minds messed up. Uncle Sam wants you. That's what normal people do. You see? And this is the kind of world that has been put in upon us. And this is the kind of fat game that has been run upon us for generations upon generations.